Chapter 11, Minnesota State Government and the Federal System. Please write down the heading, the Federal System. Please write down the first bullet. The framers created a federal system or federalism in which the central government and states share power. Then write down the last bullet. The 10th Amendment says that states may exercise all powers not given to the federal government or denied to the states. These are reserved powers. The federal system, the Constitution and federalism. The framers created a federal system or federalism in which the central government and states share power. When state and national laws conflict, the national law rules. The Constitution forbids states to make treaties with foreign countries, declare war, keep an army in peacetime, issue money, or impose import taxes. The 10th Amendment says that states may exercise all powers not given to the federal government or denied to the states. These are called reserved powers. Please write down the first bullet, enumerated powers, express powers, powers given specifically to the federal government by the Constitution. Please write down concurrent powers, which are powers shared by the state and federal governments. And finally, please write down the Supremacy Clause in Article 6 makes the laws of Congress the supreme law of the land. Enumerated powers, express powers. These are powers that are given specifically to the federal government by the Constitution. States use reserve powers to promote health, safety, and welfare of their citizens. They set up police forces, build roads, run schools, and organize local governments. Concurrent powers are shared by the state and federal governments. The Supremacy Clause in Article 6 makes the laws of Congress the supreme law of the land. Here's a chart that explains the division of state and federal powers. In this diagram, you have in the blue express powers, implied or inherent powers given to the federal government. In the purple, you have concurrent powers, which are powers that are shared between the national and state governments. And then in the red, you have reserve powers, which are powers that are reserved to state governments. On this slide, I want you to write down Article 4 requires every state to have a Republican form of government. Governmental cooperation. The federal government provides grants and aid or money to the states to help pay for their programs. The federal government gives grants to states, cities, and counties. Article 4 requires states to give full faith and credit to the laws and court decisions of other states. Article 4 requires every state to have a Republican form of government. The federal government will defend state governments against invasion or domestic violence. In return, state governments provide services to the federal government and approve constitutional amendments. Please write down state constitutions. Then I want you to write down the third and fourth bullets on this slide. The third starts with state constitutions establish different types of local governments, and the fourth starts with state constitutions regulate the ways state and local governments can raise and spend money. State constitutions vary, but they all provide for separation of powers among three branches of government. They spell out the amendment process for their state. State constitutions contain a preamble and Bill of Rights that include all or most of the protections in the U.S. Bill of Rights. State constitutions establish different types of local governments, including counties, townships, municipalities, special districts, parishes, and boroughs. State constitutions regulate the way state and local government can raise and spend money. A state's constitution is the highest law in the state, but it may not clash with the U.S. Constitution. Please write down all of the information on this slide, or please take a screenshot of the information on this slide. On this slide, we have basically a comparison between federal government characteristics and state government characteristics when we're looking at the three branches of governments. On the federal side, at the executive level, we have the president, and in this case, President Joe Biden. The president serves a 4-year term, a maximum of 2 terms. For the legislative branch, the U.S. Congress leads the legislative branch. There are 435 voting House members with 2-year terms, 100 U.S. senators with 6-year terms, and they are responsible for making laws for the entire country. Finally, we have the judicial branch, which is led by the U.S. Supreme Court. They uphold the U.S. Constitution and interpret the laws for us. There are 9 members, and they have lifetime appointments. On the federal side, the federal government governs over 330 million people. On the state side, the executive branch is led by Governor Tim Walz. In Minnesota, the governor serves 4-year terms, and we have an unlimited number of terms that a governor can be elected for. The legislative branch is led by the Minnesota State Legislature. The Minnesota House of Representatives has 134 members. They all serve 2-year terms. The Minnesota State Senate has 67 state senators, and their terms are a little different. To start each decade, those who are elected to the Minnesota State Senate serve 2-year terms. After that 2-year period is up, if they are reelected again, they serve a 4-year term. And then if they are reelected after that, they serve another 4-year terms. Each decade, we start over, and they start with a 2-year term, and then it goes 4 years and 4 years again. The Minnesota State Legislature makes laws for the entire state. Finally, the judicial branch of government in Minnesota is led by the Minnesota Supreme Court. They uphold the Minnesota State Constitution. Currently, there are 7 members, and they are all elected to 6-year terms unless they were appointed by the governor to finish a term. After that term would end, they would be up for re-election. The Minnesota state government governs the 5.4 plus million people that live in our borders. Here is a map of Minnesota broken down by the Minnesota House districts. On this slide, we transition to start covering the Minnesota State Executive Branch. We start with the office of the governor. Please write down Governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, Democrat, and then I want you to write down terms, requirements for Governor of Minnesota. Tim Walz is the governor of Minnesota, and he's a member of the Minnesota DFL party. The term for a governor is 4 years in office, and in Minnesota, You can run as often as people will elect you. There are no term limits. The requirements for governor: you need to be a qualified voter. You need to be at least 25 years of age. You need to be a Minnesota resident for at least 1 year, and you need to be a U.S. citizen. Continuing with the governor's office, please write down all of the information on this slide. The governor's responsibilities. Executive branch. The governor is responsible for administering laws in the affairs of the state. The governor appoints heads of the departments and agencies, and the governor acts as commander-in-chief of the state military forces, National Guard. Legislative branch. The governor informs the legislature on the condition of the state. The governor proposes a state budget. The governor reviews bills the legislature passes and can approve them or sign them into law or reject them, veto. The governor can also call emergency legislative sessions. Judicial branch. The governor appoints judges to fill vacancies in district, appellate, and the Minnesota Supreme Court. The governor also issues pardons and reprieves and can restore civil rights to convicted felons. Next is the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota. Please write down Peggy Flanagan, the information underneath Peggy Flanagan. The Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota is Peggy Flanagan. The Lieutenant Governor serves a 4-year term, and their requirements are basically the same as the governor. You must be a qualified voter. You need to be at least 25 years of age, and you need to be a Minnesota resident for at least 1 year. And you need to be a U.S. citizen. The responsibilities for the Lieutenant Governor. They represent the governor. They assume the governor's responsibilities in the governor's absence or if a vacancy occurs. And then they assume whatever duties the governor assigns. Another office within the Minnesota State Executive Branch is the Minnesota Attorney General. The Minnesota Attorney General is elected by the people of Minnesota. Please write down the words Attorney General. Then I want you to write down the term of the Minnesota Attorney General, the requirements for office, and the first 2 bullets under the word responsibilities. Keith Ellison, a Democrat, is the current Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. The Attorney General serves a 4-year term, and the requirements are as follow. They need to be a qualified voter, and they need to be at least 21 years of age. The responsibilities for the Attorney General are: they are the state's lawyer and legal advisor. They represent the state in court cases. They provide legal services to state government. They enforce laws concerning charitable organizations, and they protect the public rights. The next statewide office that is a part of the executive branch is the Minnesota State Auditor. Please write down the words State Auditor. Next, write down the term for the State Auditor, which is 4 years. Please write down the requirements for the State Auditor, and then write down the first 2 bullets under responsibilities for the State Auditor. The current State Auditor is Julie Blaha, and she's a Democrat. She was elected to a 4-year term. The requirements for the state auditor are as follows. You need to be a qualified voter, and you need to be at least 21 years of age. The responsibilities for the state auditor are: they're responsible for monitoring financial affairs of the state. They collect, check, and standardize financial information from local units of government. They also investigate audit reports. The final office of the Minnesota State Executive Branch that we will talk about is the Minnesota Secretary of State. Please write down the words Secretary of State. Then write down the term, which is 4 years, the requirements for office, and then I want you to write down the first 3 items under responsibilities. The current Secretary of State for Minnesota is Steve Simon, and he's a member of the Democratic Party. The office of the Secretary of State has a 4-year term. The requirements for office: you need to be a qualified voter, and you need to be at least 21 years of age. Responsibilities: the Secretary of State manages elections as the chief elections official. They regulate Minnesota businesses. They act as a custodian of official records. They certify official documents, the governor's executive orders, and laws the legislature passes. On this slide, there are a list of many different departments and agencies throughout the executive branch of Minnesota state government. The next couple of slides will focus on the Minnesota State Judicial Branch. Please write down Judicial Branch. Next, I want you to write down Minnesota Supreme Court. 7 total members, 1 Chief Justice, 6 Associate Justices. I want you to write down the term, which is 6 years, the requirements, and then I want you to write down the first 3 bullets under responsibilities. The Minnesota Judicial Branch is led by the Minnesota State Supreme Court. There are 7 total members. There's 1 Chief Justice and 6 Associate Justices. Minnesota State Supreme Court justices serve 6-year terms. The requirements for office: you need to be licensed to practice law in the state of Minnesota. Responsibilities of the Supreme Court: they hear appeals on decisions from the Court of Appeals, Workers' Compensation Court of Appeals, the tax courts, and persons convicted of first-degree murder. They hear the constitutionality of cases. They are responsible for interpreting the laws and the Minnesota State Constitution. They regulate and supervise all of the courts in the state. They recommend improvements of the judicial system, and they oversee law practice and judicial planning for Minnesota. Judicial branch continued. Please write down the Court of Appeals. Write down the members, 1 Chief Justice and 18 other judges. Please write down the terms, 6 years. Requirements and responsibilities. Do not write conciliation court. We're going to skip over to district courts, and we'll write it down. We'll also write members. There are 10 judicial districts, each with several judges, around 291. I want you to write the terms for district court judges, and then requirements for the district court judges as well. The Minnesota Court of Appeals are the middle courts. They consist of a chief judge and 18 other judges. They serve 6-year terms, and their requirements, they must be licensed to practice law in Minnesota. The main responsibilities of the Court of Appeals is to hear decisions that are appealed from lower courts. District courts. The Minnesota district courts are the lowest courts in the state of Minnesota. There are 10 judicial districts, each with several judges, for a total of over 291 district court judges in the state of Minnesota. They serve 6-year terms and are elected by the people of Minnesota. Their requirements: you need to be licensed to practice law in Minnesota. And responsibilities: they hear the bulk of the court cases in Minnesota. They hear criminal cases, they hear public policy issues and civil cases, they hear juvenile cases, they hear family cases, they hear probate cases, and they hear traffic cases. The next branch of government we're going to cover is the Minnesota State Legislative Branch. Please write down the words Minnesota State Legislative Branch. Please write down Minnesota State Legislative Branch. Next, I would like for you to write down off of this slide 67 legislative districts. Please write down 2 House members for each district, A and B. Please write down 134 members in the House of Representatives. Please write down each district is divided and apportioned based on the population. Please write down that a House member's term is 2 years. And please write down the requirements for the Minnesota House of Representatives members. The Minnesota State Legislature is made up of a State House of Representatives and a Minnesota State Senate. Minnesota is broken down into 67 legislative districts. We'll start by covering the Minnesota State House of Representatives. There are 2 House members for each legislative district, District A and District B. There are 134 total members in the Minnesota State House of Representatives. Each legislative district is divided and apportioned based on the population. A House member's term is 2 years in length. The requirements for office: you need to be a qualified voter. You need to be at least 21 years of age. You need to be a Minnesota resident for 1 year. You also need to live in the district 6 months immediately preceding the election. Responsibilities: legislatively, they introduce and study ideas for bills for laws. All revenue-raising bills begin in the Minnesota State House. They serve on standing committees. They pass state laws. All bills must pass both the House and the Senate. They can override the governor's veto. Judicial responsibilities: they judge election qualifications of members. They can expel members. And the Minnesota House can impeach members of the executive branch and judicial branch. Please write down Minnesota State Senate. Please write down all of the information under membership, term, and requirements. The Minnesota State Senate has 67 state senators. There is 1 senator from each Senate district. 1 Senate district also includes 2 House districts. Term: Minnesota State Senators serve 2-year terms to start a decade and then 4-year terms in years ending with 2 and 6. Requirements for the Minnesota State Senate: you need to be a qualified voter. You need to be at least 21 years of age. you need to be a Minnesota resident for at least 1 year, and you need to be a district resident for 6 months immediately preceding the election. Responsibilities in the Senate. Legislative. They introduce and study ideas for bills for laws. All revenue-raising bills begins in the House. They serve on standing committees. They pass state laws. All bills must pass both the House and the Senate. They can help override a governor's veto. Judicial responsibilities. They judge election qualification of members. They can expel members. The Senate can convict and remove members of the executive and judicial branches after House impeachment. Please write down organization and each body. Please write down all of the information under each body. Each state legislature session begins every odd-numbered year in January and even-numbered years in February. They may meet up to 120 legislative days during the biennium, but not after the first Monday following the third Saturday in May. Make sure you have the word biennium, which is every 2-year period. They elect a member as a presiding officer. Please write down, they elect a Speaker of the House and the State House of Representatives and a President of the Senate in the Minnesota State Senate. They designate numbers, chairs, and majority members of committees. They designate the number of committee members the minority appoints. Standing committees are an important part of how the state legislature does their jobs. They study and research bills. They hear public testimony on bills. They make recommendations to the full House and Senate. They also participate in conference committees. They resolve differences when the House and the Senate pass different versions of a bill, and it typically consists of 3 to 5 members of each body. On this slide here, we have state senators and state House members that represent the bulk of the area where Rosemont High School students come from. For example, Senator Greg Clausen represents District 57, which covers a lot of Apple Valley and Rosemont. House member John Hewitt covers the bulk of Rosemont in the State House of Representatives as a representative for District 57B. Robert Bierman covers much of Apple Valley and is the State House Representative for 57A. House member John Koznick and Pat Garafalo covers areas that would encompass Lakeville and Farmington. This slide includes some of the House standing committees and Senate policy committees.